بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator, He's our maker. He's the one who creates every situation in the world. That is our aqidah, our tawheed. We believe in the formula of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. There is no movement and no power that is initiated in the universe except with Allah and through Allah. So we believe in this aqidah of tawheed. Allah is the maker, creator of all situations, and Muslims must hold this aqidah to be much more than a universal truth. It must be implanted in their hearts, and they must resonate and actually believe that this is all Allah's doing. Whoever is the culprit or the reason for the disease on earth to be manifested or promoted, that's a separate discussion altogether. But in the current gloom, unfortunately, that we are facing, we must observe certain Islamic approaches to the whole crisis. And it's not that Muslims are unaware of or oblivious of crises in the past. These types of crises have always occurred in Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries, and Muslims and other people have always dealt with such crises. And there are so many incidents in Muslim Spain and in Syria, in Africa, also in India, where there were just so many devastating plagues and events that destroyed so many people. So we do have a precedent, and we must behave in such a way that reflects our being an ambassador for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we are ambassadors for his approach. And more than that, as I emphasize here at Darul Qasim, we have to represent certain civilizational values when it comes to understanding how Islam works. And that is where our focus should be. As far as Muslims living in a non-Muslim land, it is very clear that we do need to follow the law of the land and make sure that we do not do anything that is seen as criminal or negligent in the eyes of the government, especially, and also in the eyes of other authorities within the government. And we should be careful that we do behave in a respectful way, so that it shows that we are good citizens of the country. I mean, being part of a country requires that you are a citizen, and citizenship requires that you are a good citizen and not a bad citizen. So you must be aware that not everything that we do is going to translate into something that others might see as being good citizens or respectable citizens, and so on. So the first and most important issue that Muslims must appreciate is that they are living in a non-Muslim land, and they have to follow the laws and the codes, and perhaps even the recommendations of the government, especially this time, where the government has recommendations and the healthcare authorities have recommendations, the medical community has recommendations, and we should be cognizant of those, and we should follow those as much as possible. At the same time, we also have in our deen, we have the responsibility of applying the Islamic duties on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and even yearly basis, as you know, this might spill over into the Hajj season, and then Muslims in the world will be perhaps emotional that Hajj will not be performed. And to that we must look into our history and actually find out that there were times in the past when Hajj was not performed. And then as far as Ramadan is coming, inshallah, and we must observe Ramadan the best way we can, and there are dispensations in the Sharia where you are allowed to do Taraweeh, definitely at home, and make sure that there is no congregation as such of more than 5 or 10 people. That is perfectly valid in Islam. People should not take Islam to be their own property and then distort it and destroy it the way they think Islam should be. And then obviously on a weekly basis we have Jum'ah, Salatul Jum'ah, which is also now a major concern for not just the people who run the masajid, but also for the average Muslim who wants to go for Jum'ah, because that's his weekly affiliation, emotional attachment to Allah, to the masjid. And if Muslims feel they're deprived of that, then that's also a test from Allah. We have to make sabr and do what is best for our community, for the civilization of human beings, and we must maintain law and order. And then the individual salat that we perform sometimes in the masjid throughout the week, and that is also then going to be overridden by the societal need of the hour, and that is to make sure we take every precaution that we don't harm or hurt others. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned this in one very unique hadith, and every hadith of the Prophet is unique. Al-Muslimu man salim al-Muslimun min lisanihi wa yadihi. That the Muslim is a person who protects and guards other Muslims from his tongue and from his action. So if we know medically, scientifically, that our going to the masjid is definitely going to hurt another Muslim, then based on this definition of Islam, we're not Muslim, because we're hurting other Muslims, and we should be mindful of that as a civilizational value, that as Muslims we don't do this to each other, we don't hurt each other. Our code of greeting sums it up: Assalamu alaikum, salam, peace be upon you. That we don't want to hurt you. And if you go to the masjid in hordes and we say Assalamu alaikum to each other, then there's a bit of hypocrisy there. So we have to be careful that we don't over-emphasize the emotional attachment, and realize that we are responsible individuals. The Prophet ﷺ said, Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyatihi. Every one of you is a shepherd, and everyone is responsible for his shepherd and for his herd. So we must realize that we have a herd here, and the herd is the Muslim community, and we have to take care of it. And the way we take care of it is, first of all, by not killing it, and then not hurting it, and not putting the society and the community in harm's way through our actions. And I think the fuqaha and the muftis of our community, mashallah, have a handle on this, and we are trying to mitigate their responsibility Islamically, so that they are able to follow the rules and regulations and the recommendations of the state and also the federal government, so that we are good citizens. Good citizenship requires that you follow rules and so on. At the same time, the question is, what do we do about the emotional and spiritual loss? Okay? So the fact there is that there is no spiritual loss if the Sharia has given you a dispensation and given you an alternative to what it is you're doing. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this in so many different occasions. The Quran mentions this as a rule, that Allah doesn't want to burden you in the issue of making wudu with water. If you're not able to make wudu with water, if you don't find water after looking for it, then the Quran allows you to make tayammum. And the Quran emphasizes the point is that Allah doesn't want to burden you, but He wants to purify you. Now, how does sand and dust and dirt and the soil of the earth purify you? I don't know. But the Quran says it purifies you. Water purifies us. That's natural. That's a no-brainer. That striking your hands on dust and dirt and making tayammum, how does that purify you? You say, well, we don't know, but that's Allah's command. it does purify you. And that is what the point is that Allah doesn't want you to burden yourselves in such a way that is not advisable in terms of, first of all, Islamic law, and more importantly, in terms of human life and human sanctity and human dignity. So I think we don't need to worry about the spiritualness of this. It is very spiritual. And the Prophet ﷺ did predict that a time will come when acting on Islam and Islamic issues will become very difficult. And he told the Sahaba at that time that anyone who then acts upon Islam at a time when it will be like, handling fire, handling coal in your hands, and those who perform actions in those times, they will receive the reward of 50 people. So the Sahaba asked, 50 people of their time or 50 people of our time? The Prophet ﷺ said, 50 people of your time, meaning the Sahaba's time, that they'll be rewarded that much. So I think spiritually, inshallah, we hope that Allah will accept whatever it is we do as an alternative substitute, and also hope that Allah rewards us for that. And keeping that in mind, we have to remain calm and not become agitated by the situation. And so at the same time, there is a universal value to this civilizational values of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in terms of Tawheed, that he was the first one to submit to Allah's will. And if this is Allah's will, then we must acquiesce, at least in principle, and say, if this is Allah, that if this is what you want, then we're okay with it, except that we'll do whatever we can to minimize the effect of the virus and hopefully to eradicate it. And that is our position in terms of managing the crisis. So a Muslim manages the crisis in different ways, and non-Muslims manage in different ways. They both agree that we should do everything physically and medically possible to limit the spread of the virus and also to hopefully find a cure. But we differ in the sense of that the cure and the managing is not necessarily limited to physical means. We have a whole structure and system of ibadah through the Prophet ﷺ that tells us that we must manage through the spiritual means of petition, through dua, supplication, and through sadaqah, and through nafil ibadah. And as Ramadan is coming, maybe even nafil fasting and du'as, and making sure that we help each other as a sense of responsibility, that in this time of crisis we don't go into a very selfish mood, and mode is all about me, my rights are not being fulfilled or met. It should be that we're looking out to help others in our neighborhood, maybe our parents or our close relatives. They need our help more now than ever. And then this is a time for families to come together, to unite, so Muslims come together and unite, and Muslims should not try to disunite anyone, and people who lash out at other Muslims in this time of crisis, they're not doing us a favor. In fact, they're harming us by labeling other people and by pointing fingers at other people for not doing their job, etc. It's a very trying time, number one. Number two, it's very confusing, and in this time of confusion, it is difficult for us to assume that people are thinking rationally all the time. So in that state of mind, obviously there are going to be some mistakes. Okay, the physicians may make mistakes, the government may make mistakes, and the health authorities may make mistakes, and the ulama may make mistakes, and people who are now acting, Muslims active, they may make mistakes. Everybody are prone to making mistakes in this time of crisis. That's just the way human beings are, and they perform. As long as the intention is to help each other, then we should remain, inshallah, united. And that is, I think, one of the greatest takeaways, that Allah is showing us how to unite in a universal crisis. At the same time, we must invoke Allah's name, His assistance, and be part of the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ as Muslims, that we turn to Allah, and we must increase our focus in ibadah, as I've mentioned, and we must do whatever it takes to help us come out of this crisis. Inshallah, hopefully we make dua that Allah removes this harm for us. May Allah eradicate this virus, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us to a place which is much better, much more comfortable, and much more, inshallah, livable. And we hope that everybody appreciates our position on this issue, and we do need to work together, and we need to come together, and we need to vouch for each other, and we need to make sure that we represent the Prophet ﷺ in the best way possible, that if, God forbid, on the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ asks us that you were in this crisis, how did you represent me? Do we have an answer ready? If you do, great, and if you don't, then we should go back to the drawing board and then look into ourselves. There's a sense of introspect that is needed, and we must, through this introspect, reform ourselves as individuals first, and then as a society secondly. Rabbana Yasir, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with us and protect us and preserve us. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen.